Following the nationalist victory during the Spanish Civil War, Spain found itself thrust into a new authoritarian regime under the dictatorship of Francisco Franco, known as the Spanish state. Throughout his reign as dictator, Franco implemented a strict regime persecuting political opponents, censoring the media, repressing Spanish cultural identity, and nearly establishing absolute control over the nation and those in it. As Franco's regime flourished, Spanish society, and women in particular, faced many changes and hardships. Following Franco's rise to power, cultural activities were repressed, promoting those in which Franco favored, while suppressing those in which he viewed as a threat to the identity of Spain. Franco then declared Catholicism to be the official religion of the country, establishing the Catholic Church as the central part of the Spanish society. As a result, traditional Catholic values were promoted, thus forth cultivating the establishment of rigid gender ideologies and strict expectations of the societal role of women. This conservative ideology promoted the notion that the destiny of women was merely that of motherhood and enforced the upholding of traditional feminine values. Women were prompted to act as a loyal and devoted wife, mother, and daughter, as well as a diligent and devoted citizen of the Spanish state. As a result, women were limited to childbearing and caretaking roles centered around the family and within the household. Work outside the home was highly discouraged, with slight expectations made for jobs that were interpreted as an extension of women's natural domestic and maternal duties, such as teaching or nursing. Gender was viewed as a strict biological characteristic with no room for interpretation or debate.
The oppressive nature of the regime subjected women to systematic patriarchy. After the partial restoration of the Civil Code of 1889, women were declared merely property of their husbands and were subjected to an immense array of diminished rights. In 1934, the Sección Femenina was created, which served as a fundamental official institution throughout the Franco regime. Following orders of Francisco Franco, the institution sought to shape Spanish women into Francoist ideals. Much emphasis was placed on social service, as the founder noted that the mission of a woman is to serve. The Sección Femenina utilized propaganda to permeate its political and societal goals throughout the nation. This institution served as a powerful enforcer of Franco's societal expectations of women and strict gender ideologies. Cinema during this regime also played a large role in the implementation of Franco's gender ideals. Films throughout the Franco regime enforced idealized notions about the role of women in society, depicting women as pure and Catholic housewives. On the other hand, women who acted in opposition to this idealized stereotype were subjected to harsh ridicule and punishment, serving as a warning to moviegoers and all Spanish women alike to act in accordance to the highly regimented societal roles or reap the consequences.
Artists in the film industry suffered expressive freedom throughout the Franco era. Cinematic pro-Franco supporters funded the pro-national cinematography in Spain, which was a serious downfall of the Spanish film industry. This meant that most left-wing creators were forced into exile, which included actors, directors, and cinematographers. Those who remained were largely conscripted to inject right-wing propaganda into their work.
After Franco's death in 1975 and the fall of Franco's regime, Spanish society experienced a period of great change and progress. No longer bound by strict censorship limitations, Spanish filmmakers experienced newfound freedom of expression, ultimately impacting their content and depiction of women. Free from Franco's forced idealized depiction of women, filmmakers began exploring gender and roles of women, serving as a stark contrast from the strict expectations, values, and female gender identity imposed on society throughout the Franco regime. Throughout the years 1976 through 1986, Spain experienced a cultural renaissance known as La Movida Madrilena movement. This countercultural movement served as a means to break free from the restrictive identity imposed on the Spaniards during the Franco regime, ultimately aiding the newer generation in its development of new identity. It's characterized by its rejection of traditional social and cultural norms, along with its exploration of former taboos. According to Mark Allenson, the Movida was primarily cultivated through the younger generation, noting that it shares with many other youth cultures the characteristics of spontaneity, disrespect for authority, playfulness, and erotic curiosity. And it also shares the social context of mass youth unemployment, which conditions the predicament of youth across contemporary Europe. Spanish filmmaker Pedro Almodovar is often correlated with the La Movida Madrilena movement and remains a notable example of post-Francoist freedom of systematic expression and exploration of gender identity. Almodovar exemplifies the stark changes from Francoist ideals that occurred during this movement throughout a variety of his films. Throughout these films, Almodovar challenges traditional Spanish gender roles and expectations, while portraying women in complete opposition to the expectations and regimented ideals enforced throughout Franco's reign.
Ya está. Mírate, Juana. ¿A que está maravillosa?
¿Te gusta más así?
Sin comparación. Mira, si fueras menos cardo, ahora que se llevan las caras raras, hasta podrías ser modelo.
No me veo yo en una pasarela. Me gustaría
In
ser jefe de
fact,
prisiones.
Almodovar humanizes his
Rodeado de
female
tíos todo el santo
characters,
día.
allowing them the
Sí,
ability to break free
Fíjate,
from
típica.
traditional
Desde luego.
expectations and take control of their identity, their destiny, and even their sexuality.
Juana, por favor.
Throughout Pepe, Lucy, Bomb, y Otras Chicas del Montón,
Juana, ¿tú nunca
viewers
has
are
estado con un
introduced
hombre?
to Pepe,
No.
the antithesis
Bueno, con
of
mi hermano
Franco's era's
¿Has hecho
ideal
incesto?
Catholic women.
No sé si era incesto.
Almodovar challenges traditional beliefs by
Bueno,
depicting Pepe as a
Como todos los
dirty
enamorados,
talking
le gustaba
virgin.
mucho follar.
Pepe's
Será la
primary
enamorada,
characterization
Ya,
cultivates
pero que no se empezó
questions
con las
about
mujeres,
what
con las
pure
cabras,
really
y con
means
todos los
in the
corderos del
context of
pueblo. Y luego
Francoist
empezó a
gender
defenderme. Y
expectations.
antes de que violara a todas las vecinas,
During Franco's
claro, me
regime,
dejaba que me pegara
purity
de polvos.
coincided
Se desahogó.
greatly with
Bueno,
virginity.
siendo así, a lo
Therefore,
mejor no ha sido
technically,
incesto.
Pepe is a
Pero claro, Juana,
pure
por eso
in the
estás tú
sense
tan
that she is a
traumatizada.
virgin.
Qué traumatizada. Donde
However,
se
her
come
language
muchacho.
and actions contrast
La señora
immensely
porque no la
with those expected of a traditional Spanish woman. This conflict addresses the dichotomy between a virgin and a whore, blurring the previously harshly pronounced lines between them, showing that identity is not black and white, as it was made out to be. Ultimately, this paves the way for exploration and development of various new gender identities, free from the Francoist dichotomy. Therefore, women were no longer expected to perfectly and completely fit into the stereotype of either a whore or a pure virgin. With that being said, it is apparent that purity and virginity played a central role in determining a female's identity throughout Franco's reign. However, Almodovar sheds light on the absurdity of this notion. This is exemplified as Pepe is urged to undergo a procedure to restore her virginity after being raped. This controversial scene forces viewers to address the concept of what purity and virginity truly is, and how or why it was believed to play such a central role in a female's overall identity. As a result, Almodovar seems to suggest that women should no longer be forced into a strict identity based upon whether or not they've had sex. Another way Almodovar addresses and expands the female gender identity throughout his films and in Pepe, Lucy, Bomb y Otras Chicas del Montón is through his exploration of female sexual promiscuity and relationships outside of what the Catholic Church would deem godly and appropriate. In doing so, viewers are exposed to a world of options and opportunities far from the Catholic ideal of a pure and holy marriage only between a man and a woman, which in their view should be the only place for sexual interactions. The film portrays many sexual relationships occurring outside of the restraints of marriage, some even being between two women. Whereas sex was considered something shameful and limited to the bounds of marriage throughout Franco's regime, Almodovar depicts sex in a completely different light. In fact, throughout the film, extramarital sexual interactions are celebrated and encouraged. This sexual freedom and liberation no longer subjects women to the harsh Francoist dichotomy. Additionally, Almodovar highlights that sex is no longer portrayed as merely an act to reproduce offspring. Therefore, Almodovar seems to reject the Catholic belief that women are only destined to reproduce and be pure, devoted, and obedient housewives. This is emphasized as well through the characterization of Lucy, who is the antithesis of Franco's female ideal. His strong female characters are depicted in a raw and realistic way, which helps to show that the Francoist female gender identity was incredibly unrealistic and inaccurate, and left little room for renderings of the so-called norm. However, that norm probably was not truly a norm. It was just an idealistic identity forced upon women as a means to control and oppress them, while bolstering the system of patriarchy. Almodovar explains the importance of women in his life.
Obviously, women are very important in my movies. I'm not completely conscious, but anyway, if I have to think about, in my childhood, I was surrounded by women. My mother, the neighbors, and all that. And they were very strong women. They were women that really fight to survive and that make the family survive. And my debut, it was making crazy comedies. So I wanted just to recover that period and trying to also to recover the lightness of and the explosion of liberty and the celebration of sex, drugs, and everything of that decade in Spain.
Almodovar, throughout his films, illustrates his female characters in stark opposition to that ideal, depicting them as driven women with careers that weren't considered extensions of women's natural domestic and maternal duties, such as teaching or nursing. Ultimately, his films promote the dissolution of strict and oppressive female gender role expectations and simultaneously encourages female empowerment, sexual liberation, and equality. Another one of Almodovar's films in particular, Volver, illustrates some revenge and adaptations to the changing times. The film begins to depict the father figure as a lazy, drunk, and disrespectful father who barks sleazy sexual slurs at his wife Penelope Cruz, as well as his daughter. Later, the audience finds out that the disgusting father tried to rape his own daughter, and in defense, the daughter stabs and kills him. After cleaning up the mess, the mother, Penelope Cruz, and her daughter take the dead body and throw him into a freezer. They then decide to bury the freezer in a swamp-like area and refrain from telling anyone about his whereabouts. This symbolic moment highlights the end to gender inequality and tries to call attention to the appalling reality of rape in our society today. Almodovar explains his interest in depiction of women in films. He says, "Yes, women are stronger than us. They face more directly the problems that confront them, and for that reason, they are much more spectacular to talk about. I don't know why I'm more interested in women, because I don't go to any psychiatrist and I don't want to know why. Almodovar's success with Voltaire highlighted the changing times that so desperately needed to happen. There's still room for improvement with the gender imbalance. For example, women on average still make 30% less than men for the same occupation. Though the film industry has reached tremendous success and freedoms of expression since the Franco regime, there is still lots of room for improvement. The Franco ideologies still haunt Spain in that there are still depictions and oppression of women. With cinema's freedom to speak out about problems in everyday life, it will be up to the artistic cinematic developers to make the Spanish society an equal and diverse community for all.